Sup, this is Gregatron. This, 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 this. Look at it. Yeah. Yeah. Look at it. This. Yeah. 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 This is what's good? Do you like my shirt? Yeah. All right. So I got a good topic for you guys. Ironically, my brother just dropped a video talking about science fiction stuff, and I was just about to drop this video in my head. It's science fiction-y, so shout out to my brother, Sci-Fi Guy 2094. I'll put him in the description box. Anyway, a couple years ago, I was working with a couple guys, and I asked them, hey, because you guys know me, I'm the what if guy, all right? I'm the king of what ifs. When I was a kid, my teachers used to hate when I would ask, well, what if? Well, what if? It could be history, it could be science, it could be whatever. You know those math questions, those story questions? Even that, I'd be like, what if? All right, so this question is a what if hypothetical. It's, would you rather, number one, clone yourself? Number two, freeze yourself for a period of 100 years, or maybe 100 plus years. That's two. Or would you rather time travel? And the thing about the time traveling, let's say you have to stay in that period for 1 year. All right, 1 year. So let me read them again. 1, clone yourself. 2, freeze yourself for 100 years. Or 3, time travel and stay there for a year. Anyway, me and my coworkers, we had a good discussion about this. I can't remember what all was said, but it was so thought-provoking. I was like, I need to share this on YouTube. So let's talk about the pros and cons on both. Let's start with cloning yourself. It would be cool to have a clone. It could be great. It could be a great thing because you could get more work done. You could take off work. You could kind of be in two places at once. You could be more productive, let's say. You could be taking a day off on one hand, but in reality, your clone is working for you, right? Here's my problem with that. How advanced is this clone? Is it like an identical copy of you? Because if it's not, something could go very wrong. Does this clone know everything you know? Does it have all your memories? Does it have all your attitude, or whatever you want to call it, personality? And here's the thing about a clone. What's to stop that clone from trying to potentially replace you? Right? Or what's to stop the clone from fighting with you and thinking that it's really you? Because if this clone is a copy of you, that means it might think you're the clone. So there might be some conflict between you and the clone. And it's like this world is only big enough for one of you. So with that said, I won't answer yet, but let me move on to the next one. Freeze yourself for 100 years. That's an interesting one. Because, on one hand, let's say the world is a messed up place right now. Right? So you're like, you know what? I'm just going to freeze myself. I'm just going to move on to a different time. Kind of like time traveling. Kinda. On the other hand, once you wake up 100 years later, you don't know what the world's going to be like, right? You don't know if it's going to be even more jacked up than it was when you were frozen. So you have to think about that. You got to deal with that. We have no clue how things are going to be 100 years from now. But isn't this like thought-provoking? Isn't this like fascinating? And you don't even need to be into like science fiction movies and books and things like that. I just think it's fascinating. The whole not knowing. Alright. So that could have its pros and cons. Another con would be you don't know if the machine will malfunction. You know what? For the sake of the argument, let's just say the freezing machine and the time machine both work perfectly. Alright. And let's just say the clone thing, let's just say it's a perfect copy of you. Alright. Just to minimize extra discussion. Now, let's get to the time travel. Would you time travel and stay in one spot for 1 year? Let me lay down some ground rules when it comes to the time traveling. Because there's so many different variants and ways time traveling is portrayed. The time traveling I'm thinking of is like in Dragon Ball Z, where Trunks traveled to the future, he traveled to the past. That's why he's called Future Trunks. Anyway, when he moved to the past, he was not able to physically change anything from that universe. Rather, what he changed didn't affect his future because his future already happened. Let's put it that way. So that's how we're going to play this. Meaning, if you time travel to a time and prevent something from happening, it's not going to change what's already happened. Because it's already happened, right? So it's not going to be like the Flashpoint paradox, right? If this timeline already happened and you then do this, it's not going to go like that. It's just going to stay like that. But what you did do, you created like a alternate timeline, if that makes sense. Now, with that said, would I time travel? And if so, where would I go? That's a good question. Because there's places where the future is jacked up, I'm sure. Do things get better? Do things get worse? And if you go to the past, things could also be jacked up. Who would you talk to? Who would you want to meet? Would you introduce yourself to your family members or your ancestors as you? Would you tell them who you are? Or would you just observe? But there's got to be like a rule. No, the rule to where you can't interfere with events, that should only apply for if it works to where you change the outcome of a timeline. So in this case, you're pretty much just there. You're just blending in with what already is going on. You know what I'm saying? Meaning when you go back to the present, meaning your time, everything's going to be the same. You're basically just visiting somewhere for a whole year, what time period would I choose? I kind of like the medieval times. That would be dope. But there's so many interesting timelines. It's really hard to answer that question. Like the Harlem Renaissance, you know, the English settlers, the pilgrims coming over here for the first time. I mean, even just back to the 1940s and 50s, the Roaring Twenties. That's a good time. That's such a hard question to answer. I might make that into a separate video. So, out of the three, what I would pick is gotta be option 2. Yes. Which is a tough one. Because it would be interesting to be living, it would be interesting to be alive 100 years later and you like know all this stuff from back then and you be able to compare and contrast, but the people around you don't have a clue as to what you're talking about. Also, you're like, I'm 32, so I'd be 132, and everybody else is just their normal age. It would somehow give you like a sense of wisdom. But it's cool, man. It would be kind of cool to be alive 100 years from now and you're still in the same exact health that you're in today. Whereas cloning, like I said, a clone could be an issue because you and the clone, even though you're identical, you might not see eye to eye. I don't know if my clone would rebel against me. Let's say I have a girlfriend. What if that clone tries to take my girlfriend? Or what if that clone, again, tries to replace me? But a clone would be dope in the sense that you would have like a twin, like a best friend. You could work out together. You could go jogging together. You could go to family functions together. The thing about a clone could disrupt the natural order. Because if you're walking around and there's another you walking around side by side, that could just open up a whole can of worms to hell. Like, society might not allow there to be a clone. Because what you're doing, essentially, you're playing God. You're playing God in all three categories, but when you're having a clone, you're actually creating people. You know, Full Metal Alchemist, creating people was like a taboo. The taboo about creating people was it could create a whole army. That's the taboo. So, a clone, as fun as that would be, I don't think I would want another me. Because what if this clone goes like crazy and commits a crime? Now you're responsible. Now the cops are looking for you instead of the clone. Anything could happen with that. Like, that's like a spiral of possibilities. Whereas if you freeze yourself, you pretty much have total control as to what you do when you wake up. But a clone, it's like you would have, it's like a child that you have to watch. And I know I mentioned earlier that this clone is like a perfect copy of you, but in my mind, something tells me, well, what if something goes wrong? You know? Whereas the time traveling, that would be a fun thing to do, but that wouldn't be my first option. Now, something good about that is when you do return to your time, you can tell all your friends about it and all that sort of thing. And I wonder if they would allow you to like bring stuff back. That would probably be forbidden. You can't bring things back from a different time to your current time because it could like create a shift and mess up the natural order of things. But yeah, it's Gregatron. Those are the type of things I think about. There's another topic I want to talk about. I'll give you a little preview. It's like, would you ever accept cybernetic enhancements in the way of cyberpunk? That'll be the next discussion. Alright. Until then, my final answer is yes, I would freeze myself for 100 years. Like Futurama. I think Futurama was close to 1,000 years. But still, that would be dope. And I would just be stuck there, living in the future. Or, let's just say you do time travel 100 years in the future. That's still the same thing. The only difference is you get to come back. So maybe time traveling is a better option. But you can only do this once. Ooh. And then I think I remember when I was at work, I said, well, check this out. What if you clone yourself first? And then you either put your clone in the time... Okay. Check it out. What if you clone yourself first, right? And then you either put your clone in the time machine, or let's say you freeze your clone. That way, after you die, your clone wakes up 100 years later. So in that sense, you live on through your clones. Something like that I said at work. And like, not necessarily my coworkers, but I was mind blown when I said that. Hold on. A very important person is calling me. Hey, I'm shooting my YouTube video right now. I'm shooting it. Yeah, you're in production. It was on vibrate. No one heard anything. Alright, I'll send it to you once it's up. I sure will call you back later. Alright, bye. But yeah, that's an interesting... But you can only do one. You can't double dip. You can't clone yourself and then freeze it. You only have the one option. But this is real talk, guys. This is stuff we need to be thinking about. Stuff like this. Stuff that matters. Alright. With that said, it's Gregatron. Thanks for watching. And peace.